So getting your head wrapped around loops can be a little bit tricky with figuring out how to do them and how to understand what they're actually doing. So what I'm going to do here is build off the sample code I've already given you before that takes you through having a couple of nested for loops that adjust the row height and the row number variable. And actually show you how your computer does this itself slowly when it's actually positioning out and figuring out where things will go. So to start off with, I've got two of my coordinates here. So when we're dealing with Minecraft itself, let's close out of this for a second, we're dealing with our 3D space. Alright, so we've got our X, our Z and our Y. Now the Y is what lets us go up and down, and we're not worrying too much about the Y for this one. Alright, we're just going to be focusing on putting out things along the X and the Z axis, and that'll do us just fine. So what I've got is I've represented having an X and a Z here. You can imagine the Y axis basically points out at us and through the screen. So on here, when we first start out a couple of loops, with a for loop, the variable always starts off as 0. So when we first get up here with our for height from 0 to 2, initially the height value is going to be 0. Now it's going to go through, it's done that loop, alright, it's going to now go to the inside of the loop, and it gets to row number, and again it's going to start that off as being 0. Now these are important to take into account because we use these values in our block place commands. Now, as soon as it's gone into this loop, it's set up this variable to have the value of 0 on it, and it gets to the first block place command. Now with this one, you can see that it's placing a block at row number, row height 5, so which is X, Y and Z. Row number at this stage is 0, row height at this stage is 0, and we've got 5 for our Z value. So if we were to come over to our axis, we would have to be doing X for 0. So it means we're not traveling up or down our x-axis, it's going to stay here. We're going to go along row height, we're essentially ignoring at this stage, even though in Minecraft row height's important because that will actually set your different levels of wall to stack on top of each other. Here we're just dealing with the first level, alright, the first layer. So that's why we're ignoring it here. So we've got X currently equal to 0 and we've got Z equaling to 5, which means that over here, I'll change the colour, we'll go green on this one, that we've got our first block placed just here. Alright, now it goes through, it's done that first command, it means it'll get to the next one, and this time we're placing a different colour stone, and it's going to be at 500, because these values haven't changed. We haven't gone through the loop fully yet, so they've never increased. So this time, our X is 5, which means we go up to our 5 location, which is over here, and our row height we're ignoring, and our row number is 0, so we're not travelling along the Z axis at all. So that means that we have our second block place there. Now it's worth noting as well that your player, because all of these positions are relative to where you are, you're standing right here at the 0, 0, 0 location. Everything's relative to basically where your feet are. So we've gone through, we've done one iteration of our loop, and now we're going to go back to my row number, and this time we're going to be saying, okay, we were at 0, we're now going to increase to 1. So at this stage, because we still have to go through this a bunch of times, we haven't gone back up to row height. That hasn't changed at all yet. So my row height still stays at 0. My row number will change from 0 to 1 because it's the second time around. So I'll put that over here. Now, what that means is that the next time it gets to a block place command, row number is now 1, so it's going to place this block at 1, 0, 5. So 1 for my X, 0 for my height, 5 for my Z. So I go over to I'll change my colour of my pen again. We'll go over to my X-axis. Alright, we've changed to 1, so we're going to go up 1, and 0, or the row height we ignore again, and we go across to 5. So this is where the second of the blocks would actually be placed. Then we go to the next command, and this time we've got placing the darker coloured block at 5, 0, 1. Again, we're using that row number value in the variable. Okay, so 5, 0, 1 is going to take us up 5 on the x-axis, ignoring the 0, and then we're going to go 1 on the z-axis. So we end up here. Now if we were to keep going through this, the next time around, we've done the second of those block place commands, we go back up to our for loop here for row number, and this time we increase our value to 1 more. So this time it's 2. And every time we did that, we'd be placing our variable or our blocks here and here, and it just keeps following this pattern. Every time we go through, we then increase it to 3. I've kept my numbers kind of small so I can work my way through this. Place one there, place one there, and finally we're going to get to 4. And that will place the last set of blocks here and here. Okay, now as soon as it gets to 4, that's when it's going to exit this, and it would then be going back up to my row height. It'd be increasing that to 1, and it would go through this entire process again, where it would reset my row number back to 0 again. And so we'd have the situation where all of these ones would essentially be crossed off. If my pen wants to work, it would go back to being 0, but my row height would be 1. And then we go through and it'd be 1 and 1, then 1 and 2, then 1 and 3, then 1 and 4. Then we get to the end of that, both of those would cross out and that would become 2. All of these would cross out and we go back to 1 again, and it'd be 2 and 0, 2 and 1, 2 and 2, 2 and 3, 2 and 4. And by that stage we'd actually finish and we'd have all our coordinates and we'd have our walls. So if I was going to see this in action, if I go back into my Minecraft world, and I'll just get my coding window back up, you can see that I've got the same settings here, exactly what you saw in the last one. So if I go into my chat, type in house, sometimes it's a bit laggy when I'm recording at the same time, so just in case, I'll walk a little bit ahead and I'll try and do it again. I've actually stopped walking and it gets a little bit stuck with what it's doing. Hey, stop. Okay, so get back into the chat window. There we go. Bit laggy, but it's slowly doing it, and because it's laggy you can actually see it doing it nice and slowly. Alright, so we've got our 3 layers, we've got all of our blocks put down, and if I fly up a little bit higher, you'll see that those don't actually overlap, they meet right on the edge. So if I was going to try and fine tune this a little bit, I might go back in here, and one of these I might need to extend out a little bit further, but we won't play around with that too much because we'll try and keep this as simple as we can at this stage. Now the next challenge is, how do we get it to do the other 2 walls? So how do we get it to do the walls which will be going from here to here? And what we can do is we can put in another couple of block place commands, but this time we need to change our starting point for them. Now an issue we're going to encounter is that if we place our block commands exactly where we are, then it can't place a block where we're standing, so it'll sort of have a bit of an error. So a solution for that is that we're going to offset everything up in here by a couple of blocks, and then we can test it out and make sure it works again. And the way to do that is that we've already, essentially our row numbers here, we want to increase by 2, so it starts off 2 blocks further away, and if we're doing that, we want to also increase this by 2, so everything sort of lines up. We're pushing everything out by a couple of points. So I can do some maths here. I can bring in one of these pluses, I'll drag my row number onto that, and I'll drag this whole thing back into here again. So what this is allowing me to do is I'm still going to be using that row number, which goes from 0 up until 4, but every time I'm going to add 2 to it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll drag another one out, drag my row number down here. So we're going to do it for both lots of our walls. We're going to push them out by 2, and we're also going to add another 2 to 5, which makes it 7 for both of these. Now if I run this, you won't notice a huge difference. You'll still see the walls getting built, but they will be 2 blocks away. If I made the difference more extreme, it would be more noticeable, but we don't want it to be too far away. Okay, now I've got a bunch of sample code already done down here that I wanted to bring up so you didn't have to wait for me to build it all, but you can still see it in all of the footage. Ignore that little issue at the moment. I'll drag this onto here. It does that if you have code left around here Sometimes if it's not added onto anything properly and it's got this sort of cross-hatching thing and all the colours are changed, it can cause issues for your programming. So I'm going to drag this up here, and you can see here that I've already got similar figures to what I had before. I've got my row number that I'm adding 2 to, all right, down here as well. But this time, instead of using the values of 7, we're using the values of 2. Now, what that means, you could work through that again. You can go through this same process and try and calculate it all out. But what we're basically doing is by shifting everything out by 2, we'll see if I can get this to work. I'll see if I can, this might get a little bit messy. But if I can drag this stuff out by 2, and it's also going to go 2 higher. And if I can do the same thing here, so it's going to move out by 2 and go 2 higher. So we still haven't fixed that little issue up where there's not one in the middle, but I'll leave that to you to have a think about to see if you can do it. That the next lot of commands we've got, if I flick back into this other window, that we're going to be starting, so we'd be using the same numbers we had when we first started doing this. So what I'll do is I'll wipe out this area of the numbers just so it doesn't get confusing for us. Get back my red pen, and what we were dealing with initially was that this was 0 and this was 0. So if we go back here, you can see that the next type of block we're placing is going to be at row number, whatever that is, plus 2. So if we were starting at 0, that's then going to be a total of 2. So it'll be 2, 0, 2. And 2, 0, 2 is 2, 0, 2. It's going to place it right here. So I'm going to put in a block there. And then if we go back again, you'll see this one is essentially going to do the same thing. It's going to place a block at 2, 0, and then 0 plus 2, which is 2. 2, 0, 2. So again, there's a little bit of an issue with the fact that we haven't got things shifted off by 1. So we've got essentially 2 blocks being placed in the same spot. And what we'll find is that the pink one, the pink wool I think this is, that is what will be persistent there because it's getting placed after this block. It means that will replace that one because everything's in a sequence. So if you place down 50 blocks all in the same spot, whatever the last block was is the one that will stay there. All right, so it's going to go through and do that. But then the second time, when our row number goes to 1, oops, I used the wrong color there, but that's okay. Next time it goes to 1, we're going to get a block placed here, and we'll get a block placed here. And it'll keep on going through that cycle again as it goes to 2, and you'll keep on getting all of your blocks placed until you've got essentially the walls of your house. So we'll test that out. We'll get rid of this ignore section because we don't need that. Got that there. I'll leave that on the screen so you can always pause this and try this out in your own code later on. But I'll go back into here and I'll type house again in my chat command. Let's see if it works. Here we go, nice and slow. And you can see they're all getting placed out layer by layer because it's only the first for loop that does the height. So that's always the last thing that changes. It goes up. Now when that finishes, here we go. I'll travel up a little bit and move over. I'm just being a little bit cautious because sometimes it gets stuck when I'm doing the recording and it keeps wanting to do it. So we've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks here instead of 5, and this is what I was talking about before, that because the pink is the last one gets laid down, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 blocks there. All right, so the pink one actually ends up overriding that first one there. So you'd have to do a little bit of tweaking. So this set of instructions will help you to build most of your walls, but you have to fix up a little bit of stuff around this first point, and you have to be a bit creative in how you'd avoid that area there. You also need to make your walls bigger because this isn't the size of your house. It's meant to be a 12 by 12, and you've also got some of the other aspects of the task, such as putting in doors and windows, doing a roof, and also don't forget right at the start that if you're building this on the ground, which it should be set up to do, that you should be doing a big air block fill command so it wipes everything out in the vicinity of where the house is going to be constructed. Okay, so try this stuff out, guys. I know it can be a little bit confusing when you're first getting used to this, but I find sometimes it's really important to actually try and work through step by step. If you're doing Cartesian planes in maths, you will know that your x-axis, it's normally represented along this way, and the y-axis is up there. And now I've got this way because a lot of people tend to end up orientating themselves towards the x way, and they're sort of looking that way in the front. So this more closely matches what happens when you're in your gaming environment and you first start playing around with your coordinate system. So it wouldn't actually make any difference if we swapped the x and the z around in our diagram here. You just have to be careful that when you're mapping these out, that you were actually mapping them across onto the right actual set of coordinates. So this is about as much help as I can really give you, short of absolutely giving you every step by step and it not being an assignment, being more of a tutorial. So do your best with this, and remember that you don't have to use loops in order to pass this task. You can do a whole bunch of these block place commands. So the minimum you need to know is the block place, the chat command, so you can start it all off, and you need to know the X, Y, Z coordinates. So you've really got to make sure that you've done the navigation and the scavenger hunt. And I did show it in my last video, but it's worth showing again just in case it's, because it was a little bit laggy in that last one, and this one's probably laggy as well. But to get your coordinates, you can see in my top left, I've got my coordinates. So as I move around, they change, and I can see that as I move this way, it's mostly my Z coordinates changing. My X is a little bit, which means I'm not going directly along the Z axis. If I go along here, now I am, so that's perfect, well, just about perfect. If I started going this way, now that's changing mostly my X axis. So it gives me an idea about which direction I should be heading in. So to get onto that, you go into your settings, and then when this loads up, everything's a bit slow with Minecraft and my video recording software going on right now. You do have the option to show your coordinates. So you want to turn that on, and then that will make that appear for you. So I'll leave mine on at this stage, but that's a really handy thing for when you're dealing with placing blocks in specific spots. Okay, so good luck, and just remember you can always email through a copy of your code. You've got to export your code file. You can send that to me if you've got any questions or any issues with things that you're finding really hard to get sorted out. Thanks, guys.